What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round one prop preview for the Wyndham Championship. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure tomorrow. But look at the averages from last season. We'll also go through weather for Thursday, how to attack the prop boards and Underdog and Prize Picks, and some matchups on the sports books too. But anything on top of that you're curious about, that you want to pick my brain for, feel free to let me know in the live chat. And it looks like we already got a few of you down there. Speaking of, we've got Jose, Antonio as well, excited for the new golf tournament. Also Ali and Rushing Yard as well. Hopefully you guys are having a fantastic Wednesday night. And yeah, anything that you're curious about, don't be shy to let me know at all. But even if you don't have a question, we'd love to see you in the live chat. Feel free to say hi and smash that like button if you guys haven't already as well. But let's get this thing going. So last year we have the averages on the board, which I think are going to be pretty useful for round number one, because last year the weather was ideal for 3 of the 4 days, and tomorrow it looks ideal for most of the round. So -1 scoring average, played a little bit under 69 strokes, keeping in mind that this is a par 70 setup. The birdie average was 3.94 per round. Bogey or worse average, 2.70. Fairway average, 9.18 per round. And your green regulation average, 13.14 per round. Now, to get to the weather and how that'll impact Thursday, morning looks beautiful. You've got sub 7 miles an hour of sustained winds, sub 10 miles an hour wind gust as well. In the afternoon, it's like that for the most part, but for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, they are expecting a storm to come through in the afternoon, which could halt play anytime we're getting over a half inch of rain, especially in just an hour time period. There's a chance for that to happen, as well as the chance of it being a thunderstorm in its stopping play. So if that were to be the case, conditions in the morning and the afternoon would be just fine if they're getting taken off the course. But if they have to play through a little bit of a storm in the afternoon, it could make things a hair more difficult, but only a hair more difficult. You're not talking about a sustained storm for like 4 or 5 hours. This should be a relatively quick little cell that heads through the golf course. In fact, if you take a look at some of the local weather forecasts, some of them aren't even calling for any storms in the forecast. So whether it's in the morning or the afternoon, I think that -1 scoring average is going to be pretty helpful. And when you take a look at the local weather as well, it's worth noting that it's going to be 90% humidity for round number one. So even before that rain potentially comes through, this golf course is going to be extremely soft, and not so soft that they have to play lift clean in place, but the greens are going to be extremely attackable. And then even the fairways, I think, are going to be a little bit easier to hit this year. So I would say if there's going to be any movement compared to the averages from last year, I think it would be in the easier direction. So I've put my projected average at about -1 to -1.25. And I think there's a chance, I guess, if everything ended up working out ideally, that he could play to even a -1.5 scoring average. So that would have impacts on some of these other categories. For example, the birdie average would likely go up a bit, maybe to like 4.25 per round. Bogey or worse average could go down as well, maybe to like 2.5 per round. It's hard to say ahead of time. That's why, we keep a look and keep tabs on these stats as the golf tournament goes on. But that's what I'm thinking for round number one. So they kind of set a baseline with course conditions. Fairway average, I don't expect that one to move too much in either direction. I'd say, if anything, maybe it goes slightly up compared to last year. And then the green average, I've got in the 13.25 range to about 13.5 per round. So also a hair more easy than what we had for last season, but nothing drastic, which I think is pretty useful. I would actually prefer this over drastic changes from year to year, just so that these averages are useful. Because, if we're talking about going from calm conditions to extremely windy, we can almost throw these averages out the window, but that is not so much the case this time. And we didn't have pin locations earlier, but we might get them at some point during this live stream. But round one historically at the Wyndham is not set up super difficult. In fact, out of the 4 rounds, it is the second easiest out of the 4. Easiest is round 3, which is moving day, as you would typically expect at a tournament. And then the second easiest being round number 1. So round 4, the hardest. Round number 2 is the third most difficult. Second most difficult. So it depends on how you're looking at that. But this, out of the 4, it's the second hardest for the second day. Kind of strange how they do it at this golf tournament. So we'll have to see what they choose for the pin locations, but I'm not expecting those to be that tricky for round 1. Historically, they've actually been a little bit easier. So let's go through a few props that I've already taken myself. So if you guys have seen seen the Bet the Number article. You guys already know about 2 that have mixed in. I played them on Underdog for 2.79x, but now that everyone's gotten a chance to see that article, people, especially the sports books, have started to adjust. You'd only get, and let's actually just take a look at the exact combination over here. So was it Siwoo Kim over on greens, which Prize Picks is going to be the place to take this, by the way. But I just want to show you guys for payout purposes what it moved to. I got this at 2.79x. People on the Bet the Number page were also able to get this. But now that both have gotten a multiplier, it's only 2.31x. So you'd want to avoid that with such a massive difference, nearly a half a unit difference payout-wise from what it was earlier today. But luckily, Prize Picks does have both of those players up. So though I did get my exposure for a slightly better payout, if you're going to take these two, do it for the 2.75x, right? Don't do it for the 2.31x, whatever you guys do. Try to line shop. Always try to be taking the best value that you possibly can. And that's only 4/100ths of a unit off compared to what I ended up getting, which is excusable. It's something that isn't ideal in the long run. It will make a little bit of a difference, but not a big enough difference that you have to avoid that exposure. And just to talk through these two, if you saw my article, this might be a little bit redundant. We're going to add some exposure on top of that, so don't be worried if that's the case. Siwoo Kim, he's -140 for his over for these greens. So if we go to the green and reg board, which isn't always like the thing I look at, what I mean by that is that the plus EV value on golf tends to be a little bit sketchier than what we have for other sports. For example, like a massive market like NFL or massive market like NBA betting that has billions and billions of dollars bet on it every single day is not going to have as accurate of a market as something like golf that's a little bit more niche. And I know that golf's growing in stature, growing in size. The vast majority of people that bet or play fantasy golf are either doing it with outrights on sports books or they're doing it with DFS at this point. And the biggest market is by far the outright market, and then DFS a close second behind that. Pick'em sites are probably third, I'd say, on that list. A fourth is betting straights and betting props like this on sites like Draftkings. So they still have a lot of investment. They have a lot of resources that they do give towards the golf markets. But to act like these are the holy grail, to act like they're the gospel or something like that, like they do for like NBA or NFL odds, is in my opinion a bit of a mistake. So though he's -140 towards the over, I actually think he should be juiced even more heavily in that direction, because if I think the average is going to be 13.25 to maybe 13.5 per round, we're talking about Siwoo Kim, who's a well above average player in the category, which if I show you guys that, we go to approach, go into green regulation percentage. It's not like he's a lead in the category, but he's good enough to say that he's above average in the category. Number 77 on tour is just a little bit better than that midpoint mark. So he's better than average to begin with. And then you add on top of that the fact that his course history is among the best of anyone in the field. Just to kind of cite that course history in case you guys aren't familiar, he did miss the cut last year, but he has a T33, a T2, a T3, and then even outside of the last 5 years, some other top 5 and top 10s at Donald Ross Designs. Give me some Siwoo Kim to beat that average, right? If the average is going to be 13.5 per round, I think he should be at least 14, if not 14.5 greens, which I think he should be at like 14.5 in even money. And even if you wanted to keep him at this 13.5 mark, I would have him juiced closer to -165, even -170 odds. So I think that one is clearly in our favor. Even if we just use the sportsbook odds, what they have posted, it's close to that plus EV value at -140. And then the other one was Jordan Spieth, who, believe it or not, it was kind of mind-blowing to me, but you don't have to twist my arm too much to play a Jordan Spieth prop. Let's just say that. And then he was -135 to take the over. I was like, and by the way, if you compare him to the other players, there's only like one or other two players that have the same odds for his over at 4.5 birdies. And no one else has better odds for their over at this 4.5 mark. So they're projecting Jordan Spieth for the highest amount of birdies in the field, which I don't think I'm that bullish on him, but that shows you the kind of value that's on this sort of line, because I think the average for the field is going to be at least 4 per round, if not close to 4.25. And though Jordan Spieth isn't a lead in this category for the year, we've got to consider the context for his shots gained metrics. So if we bring up Jordan Spieth for the season, he's slightly better than average, also number 77, which even with that alone, I'd be okay taking the over at 4.5. Like he should at least be at 4.5 and even money. But what's baked into this price with Jordan Spieth is that he doesn't play in slapdick fields like this. Like he doesn't play in this low level of a field really ever. The only reason he's playing it this time is because he has to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs. And for him to do so, he's got to finish like top 3, I think, or something like that. He's literally got to almost win this event to get into the next field event. So expect Jordan Spieth to first off care about this week. And the sports books are pricing him like he's the best player in the field. So I was okay taking that over. And like I said, it's not very hard for me to want to play a prop for my favorite player in the world. And this week, based on his comments, I don't know if you guys saw it today, comments came out after I entered the slip. So it had no bearing on what I was doing, but he said he feels like next year, 2026 is going to be a real big one for him. And you don't hear golfers talk like that very often. Golfers normally like to play things down a bit, right? They don't like to seem like they're too arrogant or too cocky and whatnot. When I hear a player talk with confidence, I take it seriously. And it usually is because it's the truth over the last month or so. So Spieth seemingly feels very good about where he's at this point. And he's plus EV value. I mean, it was like the biggest no-brainer in human history. So it's 2.75x, slightly worse value than the 2.79x that I got on Underdog. Just another reason, by the way, that you guys should join the Patreon page. That way you can get some of those slips before any of that line movement, but not the most terrible slip whatsoever on those two. And then let's use another slip that I took as an example of another way that you can find some props. So let's go Robert McIntyre first. So that's going to be the over on fairways hit. And then we're going to go with a Jake Knapp. Let's find them on here. So there's Jake Knapp. Over on greens regulation. And I think I got a slightly better payout on this one too, and I did. So this was 1.06x, and then same thing with Jake Knapp. He was also 1.06x. In fact, now that Knapp doesn't have the multiplier, I might actually stay away from this one. So maybe I'll give you guys a different prop to take instead of that one. In fact, yeah, I'll just take it out of there for right now. But let's start with this McIntyre prop, which, by the way, if you go to the prize pick side, he's at 9.5 and even money, or at least he was earlier. Yeah, he's still at that number at 9.5. And I know in the sports books, he's juiced towards the under. And this is an example where I think the sports books are just blatantly getting it wrong. So if we find McIntyre for his fairway line, you'll see that he's juiced towards the under. In fact, he's minus 140 in that direction. I think it should be completely flipped. If we go to his stats for this year, so we'll go to stats, go to off the tee, and we'll bring up driving accuracy percentage, well above average in the category. In fact, he's number 51 on tour. So ranking out even better than guys like Spieth and Siwoo Kid did in their respective categories. So he's above average. Average last year was 9.18 per round. It's going to be real humid tomorrow. Remember that, right? That's going to help out with the green prop I took with Knapp as well, which I know we're not going to use for the slip, but that's another reason why I think there's going to be dartboards to attack out there. But with Robert McIntyre, you would at least project him for probably about 9.5, which is just slightly above that average, if not significantly above that. I mean, a guy like him is averaging a half a fairway to a fairway more than your PGA Tour average over the season. So if the average is going to be like 9.2 per round, that's at least 9.5, if not close to a 10 projection, which is why I think the odds should be flipped, right? I think it should be minus 140 towards the over, which with this extra payout, 1.09x, is by far the better place to pay it, right? You play it on a site like Prize Picks, you're only getting the normal payout multiplier that you would typically find. You do it on a site like Underdog, and you can juice up the payout a little bit more. And I've got to take a look at what else I took on Underdog to see what hasn't moved yet. So just 1 second. I guess it was just those 4 props that I took on Underdog, including, I know we took that on quote unquote Prize Picks with the other one, but I did end up entering that on Underdog myself. I don't really have a whole bunch to pair up with McIntyre here. I guess you could go with the Jake Knapp one at that 13.5 mark for 2.9x, 2.96x, I should say, a little bit better than that. Not the worst that I've seen, but knowing that I got 3.2x combining those two, it makes it something that's a little bit harder to co-sign. So I guess if you're late to the party, it's not the worst thing to go out there and chase, but maybe go slightly lower unit wise if you're getting it for under that 3x value. But the reason why the green regulation one made sense is I just want to talk about it because there are other green and reg props that I've mixed in. In fact, I'll probably show you guys another one here in a second that makes sense. But if the average is going to be 13.25, maybe even 13.5 per round, well, Jake Knapp, and we mentioned this last week, it made no sense, and we completely leveraged it. We made sure to make the books pay for this kind of thing. And Knapp's a well above average green player. And not only that, he's playing some of the best golf of anyone on the field. He's top 5 in recent form ranking. He's got some of the best iron form of anyone that's even teeing it up. Number 43 in the category. Again, better than Siwoo, better than Spieth in their respective categories. How the hell was he juiced under earlier today, right? He had a multiplier towards the over when I took him. That made absolutely no sense. And we can translate that sort of idea to other green and regulation props. In fact, I'll go ahead and show you guys another one here. Like an over on Matt Fitzpatrick. Matty Fitz is at 13.5. He is in the PM, which, that storm in the PM is a little bit of a nuisance, but I don't think it's really going to be that big of an issue, especially when, and I actually think these odds should be even more juiced towards the over. If you take a look at his odds on the sports books, he's minus 150 towards the over. So, if you're a plus EV better and you do trust in some of the DraftKings odds that they have for these given categories, then you would have to love that over at 13.5. But you take that, and I guess you could pair it up with the McIntyre, but it's a terrible payout, 2.75x. Just I couldn't recommend doing it based on, and seeing some of the other exposure that I have. I think a lot of overs on greens could make sense for those elite tier players. And I know we didn't show the green regulation percentage. Damn, we were on that category. I guess it didn't need to reload it, but you can see that Fitzpatrick is number 75 on tour. Same sort of, range as a Siwoo Kim before. So above average in that category. Siwoo was valued towards the over. Same thing with a Matt Fitzpatrick. And because I want to give you guys another slip to tail, let me give you this over on Keith Mitchell birdie. So Keith Mitchell, by the way, if we go to the birdie or better category, under scoring, birdie or better percentage, he's number 6 on tour in birdie or better percentage. So there's only 5 other players that are better. And a lot of them aren't even playing this week, right? Like JT, Scotty Scheffler, number 1 and 2, they aren't even teeing it up this week. So of the players that are teeing it up, he's number 4 out of everyone. And the average last year was about 4 per round. I think conditions are going to be pretty conducive to scoring tomorrow, which has me thinking it could be at least 4, maybe even over 4 birdies or better per round. How the hell does Prize Picks have the number 4 birdie maker in this field at that average? It just doesn't make sense, right? There's clear value towards the over. And sure, he has to get to 5+ to hit for us, but that push equity at 4 is nice to have in your back pocket. And that's another one for 2.75x that you can play. So there are a lot of different props that I've mixed in, even some unders on strokes that I've played at this point. I've mostly gone with birdie props, some strokes props, and then some fairway props as well for my exposure for tomorrow. So I haven't played that many bogey lines. The fairway lines, we had that one on McIntyre, but I'm not playing that much outside of that. I think it's one where, like, especially these guys at 4 birdies, like there's a lot of guys on the board, not just Keith Mitchell at that number, that are well above average birdie makers that are at the field average from last year. And I think conditions are only going to be just as easy as 2024, if not slightly easier than what we had for the last iteration, which makes there, in my opinion, quite a bit of value for those guys that are at 4. And the push equity can be a little bit annoying when you push. The payouts are really crappy on a site like Prize Picks, but I think enough of them are going to go over, at least fingers crossed, knock on wood, enough of them go over to make it pay off to where the pushes aren't as big of a deal. Like even if they're at 4.5, like I'd be considering the over on some of these players. Like for example, Keith Mitchell, I know he wouldn't be a plus EV value at that 4.5, but you're talking about top 5 birdie percentage player, only a quarter, maybe a half a birdie higher than the field average. That feels like a little bit of a misprice in my opinion. So that's how I'm attacking the board. There are 7 slips that I've already entered to this point for every single piece of exposure that I've entered. I know we talked about 6 props, I think, here on this live stream. For all 14 of them, you can find them on my Patreon page. And a link to that can be found in the description of this live stream, of this replay, if you guys are watching this after the fact. The prop tier is what you want to join if you guys want all the Underdog and Prize Pick stuff. And it's only $15 a month to join that. And not only do you get access to every slip as I enter it before that line movement happens, but also all the stat averages for these events. So you can see the 2024 averages. Those were posted on Monday for my Patreon members. So they got an early look at all their research. Also weather reports for these given rounds. And of course, all of the props for these events, not just round number 1, but also rounds 2 through 4. We are covering these the entire way through. So just like the live streams on YouTube, which we have for round 1, 2, 3, and 4, same thing on the Patreon page as well. So make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. Let me see if there's any bets that we need to deep dive in the chat. And then we're going to round it off with some matchups as well. So if you guys are here for the matchup bets, the 3 balls for round number 1, we'll cover that after we get through these questions. Let's catch up. So we had Robert in chat. He says, after Sam Stevens fades went close last week, any thoughts on Echeverria doing the same? So yeah, I'm not sure if the fade has anything to do with it, but I think, yeah, you called out Stevens having a good week. So good shout out there, my man. I have to say Nico Etch setting up as a good course fit this week. I like the fact that he's not the best off the tee player. This golf course, you can kind of get away with that, especially when you don't have to hit all those drivers off the tee. And the approach profile, 100 to 150 yards. He's one of the best players on tour in those buckets, and he's a good Bermuda grass putter. So I think that's why a lot of people are playing him this week. I've heard him talked up in a few different podcasts that I listen to. And I think it's a sharp play. I'm getting there myself. I'm using them in some GPP lineups. So yeah, if you're calling your shot on Nico Etch, I tend to like what you're thinking there. He said you're looking at Ben Coles for a bet, elite ball striker. Yep. And then third in fairways hit and greens hit. Yeah, so ball striking is there. Putting is the issue, like you've pointed out. The thing that is going for him, right? So if we go to the shots gained metrics, I'm on another tab right now, bringing up Ben Coles. Over his last, let's go to the last 12 measured rounds. He's gaining 1.57 shots gained approach per round. I knew it was good. I didn't know it was that good, though. And he's losing 0.75 shots gained putting per round. Let me check his stats on Bermuda grass. So on Bermuda grass for his career, he gains 0.02 shots gained putting per round. That is, by the way, compared to his 24-round baseline. His 24-round baseline is he's losing 0.02 strokes per round. It's 0.94 shots gained better per round. So, he's losing how many shots gained does that mean he's losing? 0.92 shots gained per round is actually what he's losing per round. So it's almost an entire stroke better on this type of grass. So yeah, give me some Ben Coles, man. I have him in GPP lineups. He's also relatively low owned. To bet him to win, though, so to get back to your question, like I like him in general at a week like this. I don't know if he can really flip the switch and win this thing. And I hate to say that because anyone can win that's at this level. That's a professional, has earned their tour card. They all have the talent to win at some point, but it's going to take a lot. I mean, he's going to have to make a lot more putts than he's due to make, maybe get a few that bounce back on the line and go in, but never say never. That's what I'll say about that. In the DFS format, though, where he doesn't have to win, where maybe a top 10, a top 20 is enough, I think he's got plenty of equity to get to that kind of finish. Any underdog rivals that I like, you said he loves sweating those out. Yeah, I was looking at those when they dropped. I didn't see any that really stood out to me, so I'll bring up the board for anyone that hasn't seen them. You have Ben Griffin and Fitzy that are both at a 67.5 projection. Aaron Rai, Jordan Spieth as well. Like maybe I'd lean on Spieth there, but even that is not a massive discrepancy, like maybe a half a stroke. And then you have the Bhatia Hall one. That's also pretty close. I would lean towards Bhatia there as well, but again, that's not a very big discrepancy. McIntyre Hideki is as close to a 50-50 as I've seen. And same thing with Keegan versus Hideki. So yeah, maybe the second and third matchup could be a slight lean in either direction, but nothing that was good enough for me to get there. I was going through the stats. Those were the two that were like 55-45s, those second and thirds. But yeah, 55-45 isn't enough to get over those inherent odds. So wasn't good enough for me. What's up? How am I? Doing well, Antonio. He said thoughts on Rico for the over 4 birdies. Let's take a look at the stats. So I wasn't really looking at Hoey for the over 4 birdies, but maybe it's a diamond in the rough that I should have considered. So let's go to the birdie or better averages from the season. He is number 33. So yeah, that is a much better ranking that I thought he was going to come in at. I thought he was closer to like 60, 70 on tour, especially because he's morning wave, if memory serves me correctly. Let me double check on that one. So he's teeing off at 7:01. Yeah, I could get behind that. I haven't entered it myself, so full transparency, that's not something that I have my money behind yet. But in fact, if I'm going to enter another slip, if I find another prop that I really want to get some exposure to, this might be one of the first few props that I consider adding on top of that. So good shout, man. And yeah, if I add some exposure there and it hits, I'll give you a shout out tomorrow because I think that's a sharp call. You're liking Fitzpatrick over on greens? Yep, me too. Good form odds and it fits to excel at receptive greens. Yep, 100% agree with you. And yeah, I know you probably posted that before we went through it together, but I think that's a really sharp take. What's going on, Joseph? You were just going to ask about Keith, so good to know that we're on the same page. Yeah, so I'm always a big believer on Keith birdies. I play it almost every time it's available. For whatever reason, the prize picks line makers just don't like the guy or something. They price him like he's an average birdie maker when he's been an above average birdie maker for quite some time. And it's not even just this year. Like, here's the wild thing with Keith Mitchell, and this is why I don't understand the disrespect. He was second on tour last year in birdie percentage. Let's go to the year before that. I know it's not as elite as we go back, but number 78 is above average that year. Like it's really solid. Let's go to the year before that. Does he fall off like a rock or something? Nope. Number 31 on tour. And Keith wasn't as consistent these days, right? So he's still holding up his bargain. Year before that, number 70, even more inconsistent that season. Let's go back to the year before that. Surely he falls off at some point, right? Number 93 falls off a little bit, but he's still better than average. That's what that green means. That's what that green ranking on it means. And let's finally go back to the year before that, right? Is that when it happens? Is he finally below average? Nope. Number 48 on tour there. Is it finally the year before that he falls off? Nope. Number 12 on tour. and I'm just doing this to prove a point because I hope the lines maker's watching so he knows how much of a Dumbo he is. Is it the year before that? Oh, that's right. He wasn't playing in 2016, 2017. So yeah, love myself some Keith Mitchell over on birdies. I don't know what Jake and Steven are doing over there. It feels like they have something against my guy Keith. Yeah, Killer Keith as we call him. Thoughts on Rye over 10 fairways, second in driving accuracy, and the line already bumped up to 11. You said you like the push equity at 11 fairways too. Yeah, not sure I can really get behind that one, man. Like at 11 fairways. If we're talking 10 before the bump, then for sure. He was minus 160 towards the over. So there would be a lot of line value if you're getting him at 10. Not only is he 0.5 higher in the books, but also the juice in that direction. But at 11, it's a completely different scenario, right? I would say the push equity makes sense, particularly with an accurate driver, but it depends on how many times he's laying up off the tee. If he's doing what he did last year and laying up quite regularly, just hitting a lot of 3-woods, hitting a lot of irons off the tee, he goes over that 60% of the time, probably. Like, I think it's a pretty safe play. But if he changes up his strategy for whatever reason, which you wouldn't think would happen. I mean, he won last year, right? He had a lot of success with what he implemented in 2024. But let's say that he is more aggressive for whatever reason, then that could work to your detriment there. So yeah, I'd say if you're getting him at 10, then I love it. Makes a whole lot of sense, a lot of value on that number. But at 11, kind of knowing it was at 10 at one point, I couldn't really get behind that one. It's just, completely different scenario and hitting that over. And yeah, it's not like other sports where like maybe, and you know this, of course, but it's not like NFL where like a 1 yard difference isn't that big a deal. In golf, a fairway difference or a green difference is 5 to 10, 15% equity difference in either direction. Thoughts on Bhatia? So if you mean just general thoughts, I've got him at like a 7 out of 10 this week. I like the form in general. I know some people look at last week as a negative, but let's remind ourselves of exactly where he finished, right? He was in contention in the final group of that golf tournament. So through 54 holes, no one was playing better golf than Akshay Bhatia. So I think that in general, 7 out of 10. The ownership is kind of there too. So it's not like he's completely overlooked in DFS, but yeah, I think he's got a good week in him. Decent course fit too. His short game stats overseas on fescue were not good. He's one of those players, the greens overseas, if you guys aren't familiar with golf in Europe, they're fescue, they're bumpy, they're not as maintained as well. That's just the reality of it. It's better golf, more pure golf, in my opinion. Links land, being able to play the ball along the ground, but the greens themselves are shit compared to what we play on the PGA Tour. I mean, the players try not to complain about it too much because they only have to do it for like a week or two. But Akshay could not buy a putt for his life when he got over there. But now that we're getting him on the PGA Tour side, he started to make some putts last week on that bent grass. He's even better on Bermuda. So the grass this week should be a lot better for Akshay. And I know that sounds crazy. Like I'm talking about grass and how people play, but it's legitimately true. I mean, if you're a golfer, if you've been playing any sort of competitive golf in your life, you can probably attest to that. But the type of grass and the type of surface that you're putting over it matters when you're the best at your craft. It matters when you have it dialed into millimeters, hundredths of a millimeter of precision. When you hit a rock or you hit an imperfection and it takes the ball off by 5 to 10 degrees, that's drastic. That's not a little change for these players. That is 9-day difference sometimes. So I like him for that reason. He doesn't have to play on those crappy surfaces and should be able to get a little bit more to drop. We're also looking at Putnam, who ranks 4th on tour for shots gained around the green. Yeah, the around the green stats I wouldn't focus on, but I do like the putting stats. And in general, I like him at shorter tracks. Ones like this where you don't have to be a bomber off the tee. And because he wasn't even that disappointing. He was chalk in DFS the last few events. He was a quote-unquote letdown one of those 3 weeks. He's not going to be very popular this week. So I know you're probably just talking in general, maybe for bets, top 10s, top 20s, that kind of thing. I think he's a fantastic play there. But in DFS, where you can kind of leverage against the rest of the field and their biases, when somebody like that tanks at high ownership, people just, not myself, I'm not speaking for myself there, but I'm talking for like your average casual DFS player is a whiny little bitch about it, right? They get down about it. They, blame the player rather than themselves for using that crappy play, and they won't use them the next time out, right? They feel personally slighted by a guy not playing well. Like he wasn't trying or something. Like he was purposely trying to miss the cut or something when they're using them in lineups. It's like, no, man, they pay. They're independent contractors. They have to pay all their traveling expenses to be there. If they miss the cut, they don't get a paycheck. They're losing thousands and thousands of dollars for showing up. I promise you that they care a lot more about that missed cut than me and you do, unless you're putting in tens and thousands of dollars on a bet that week. you're going to be losing a lot less than they have. So, for example, with Putnam, just to take advantage of that psychologically, yeah, like maybe he didn't pay off their price tag in DFS, right? But he was trying his best. He still sets up well. There's a reason why he was super popular that week to begin with. Why not go back to those sort of players? Golf's a 4-letter word for a reason. The most variant sport, in my opinion, of all the big sports that people play DFS and bet on. So you've got to embrace that a bit. You've got to know that ahead of time. You got to know that even the best plays are going to fall flat on their face at times, and not to overreact to it. So yeah, I'm there with you on Andrew Putnam. If people are going to completely shove him to the side because he didn't pay off, then yeah, give him to me this week. What's going on? You said thoughts on McIntyre for the under 0.5 birdies versus Højgaard. And by the way, you're looking at the under on that, which I love. So by the way, the reason why these unders on matchups are usually plus EV would be because of this 0.5. And I know that you know about it because you were asking about the matchup with the 0.5. But if these guys tie, let's say that McIntyre and Højgaard make the same amount of birdies, then the under is going to be what hits between them. And the reason for taking an under on one of those would normally be a competitive birdie rate. So let's bring up McIntyre first. McIntyre is number 64 in birdie rate. And let's go to Rasmus next. Rasmus is number 46 on tour. So he's better than McIntyre in that category. This would be the classical kind of spot where you would do so, where not only are you getting the better birdie percentage player, but also the extra 0.5. The only thing I would say, and it is worth mentioning between these two players, is that McIntyre is playing the harder events. So this is something that's extremely hard to quantify. In fact, I'm still trying to search on how to quantify it myself. I think that once I figure it out, it's going to be by far the biggest edge that I have in prop betting is adjusting for field strength with some of these averages. But McIntyre's played every signature event. He's also played in all the majors, whereas Rasmus Højgaard, he's played in some of the majors this year, and I think like 1 or 2 signature field events. And it's not like every signature event is an extremely hard golf course, but the hardest golf courses that we have on tour, I think all but like 1 or 2 of them are signature field events. So somebody like McIntyre, his birdie average might be lower because of that, because of the kind of courses, because of the kind of fields that he's been playing in. So that's the only thing I worry about, is that maybe the averages on the two are, in reality, they should be closer to each other. And that whole idea, by the way, if you guys have any idea on how to quantify it, by all means, please let me know. I'm working on doing some programming with it. I'm trying to essentially quantify how strong a field is based on, and that's what I'm trying to figure out, is what to base it on, that average field rating, so that I can kind of standardize all of these metrics. Because if we had that, we can actually get an idea for the birdie difference between the two. If they were even birdie makers, that would still lean towards the under. So that's why I think that it's a sharp play. I would even co-sign it. I don't know if I'm going to enter it myself, but I could co-sign getting towards the under. But the only thing I worry about, again, it's just me playing devil's advocate, right? That's my job here, not to be a yes man and just say, yes, I like that for everything that I see. There's a lot of content creators in my shoes that just do that, right? They just get questions and they go, oh, I like that. They find like one stat and they go, oh, makes sense, right? I'm always trying to be a little bit more valuable to you guys. Or I'm always trying to kind of poke holes on any of the stuff that you throw at me, because that's what you should be doing, right? When vetting the props, trying to vet the exposure that we're getting to. And yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. So outside of that, looks like a good prop to me. And in fact, I mean, that with the Hoey over on birdies, like I don't know if I'm going to enter those two together, but like that would be a 3x payout. It's not terrible. If you want to go with the two people from chat and tail their exposure, like I actually don't think that's terrible whatsoever with those two. You said you added Keith Mitchell to make the cut with that Nap Mac, and it's 5.04x. You said, is that worth adding? So let me take a look at his odds to make the cut. And he's right on the number to get into the playoffs. So Keith Mitchell needs to make the cut to secure that. Yeah, the 0.8x, and you're still getting 5.04x. That's surprising to me. I actually thought that the 0.8x multiplier would impact that more. So yeah, if that's the kind of odds that you're getting, I'm not against that one, man. I would have thought that would have been lower than that. That's for sure. All right, let's go through some matchups and then wrap this thing up. Any other bets that you guys want me to deep dive, feel free to throw them in chat now, because after we get through the matchup section, we're going to be wrapping this thing up. But let's go through a few matchups that I've already mixed in. So number one would be a Ryan Fox. I got him at plus 200. And then let me find the exact number I got on the other matchup, because the odds on these were half the reason that I mixed them in. So this plus 175, for example, I'm not even 100% sure that I'd enter that myself. The other one, and it was actually also plus 200 I didn't know if it was plus 190 or plus 200, was on Nico Echeverria. And you can see on DraftKings, he's plus 190, so it's a little bit closer to that plus 200. But in both cases, you've got an Echeverria and a Ryan Fox, who I think you could argue should be the favorites in the group that they're playing in at plus 200 or more odds. And yeah, if you're getting that actual Hard Rock bet number that I did, I think it was just purely disrespectful. Let's go to the first one first. So Ryan Fox versus Sungjae and Woodland. Sungjae is not playing good golf. I mean, there's just no way to put it. He's playing like an average to below average player right now. So though he's the favorite per the sports books, I don't really buy that. I think he should be closer to plus 160, plus 170, maybe tied odds with the other two players, but should not be the plus 120 or so, or wherever they have him priced. Let's actually just scroll up so I can find the exact odds on that one. Or I guess scroll down was the direction for that. Yeah, plus 150. Okay, so they're starting to adjust it a little bit, but on a Hard Rock bet, I think he's like plus 120 or something, which I thought was just blatantly off with the odds here. And then you have Woodland too. Woodland's playing some pretty good golf. He's gaining strokes to the field over his last 12 rounds, but plus 190 is better than the plus 200, which is the standard odds across the board. If they weren't playing with any sort of an in-house edge, is I think way too favorable on him. Like he should be, in my opinion, plus 250, plus 300. And then, like I said, Sungjae maybe closer to plus 160, plus 170. In my opinion, if I was, pricing out this matchup, you could have Fox at this plus 150 number. So if you guys have access to Hard Rock Bet, make sure to check that out if you can. Plus 200 odds is, I believe, the best number of any of the books in the industry. I believe Fox was plus 180, plus 185 on the FanDuel side. So you can get a slightly better number than what you're getting on the DraftKings side. But even if you can only get him at plus 175, at least compared to where I'd price it, him at closer to plus 150, I still think it's a misprice, even at that sort of a number. And, I'm very, very selective about the free balls that I play. Like, I'm not somebody that enters like 10 free balls a day. I know some people do. They like their degenerate action. They like to just have a sweat, I guess, for any given round, but that's not really the ideal with any of the exposure that I'm entering. I'm always trying to generate an edge and exploit it where I can. And even at that plus 175, there's at least maybe a 5 to 10% edge there, but yeah, plus 200, you're getting the sort of edge that I'm looking for on these props. And then the other one was this Echeverria, who's going up against Seabez and then also Davis Thompson. And I don't think that this one is like drastically off. You can see that they have him at plus 190. I did get him at plus 200, so maybe not as much inherent value. But I think that he could be the favorite. At the very least, should be like flat odds across the board with these other two players, because Echeverria's form is just as good as the other two. In my opinion, he's got by far the best course fit out of them. I know we had a question about Etch before, and I really like the putting stats on Bermuda grass, but I also like him at courses where you don't have to hit driver all day. And Seabez has decent form himself too, but like Seabez is the lowest quality player, in my opinion, out of these three, if like just in a vacuum. Like if you weren't looking at recent form and you had me just ranking them, I'd go Davis Thompson, Etch, and then Seabez. So Seabez, in my opinion, should not be the favorite there. And then we'll be on top of that, that Davis Thompson doesn't have the best form recently. In fact, like all 2025, he's kind of just been middling or average at the very best. And then you give me Etch, who has multiple wins over the last 2 years. He's a little bit inconsistent, but lately has been playing the best golf out of those three players. If you take a look at my modeling, he's also the one that rates out the best out of the three. There's no reason why he should have been at plus 200, right? Which is the standard odds across the board. I think at worst, you're taking a fair number at that plus 200. And I think he should be the favorite out of the three, if not just that even number across the board. So that's what I mixed in on DraftKings, a couple different free balls. The plus 190 is a little bit more fair. I could definitely get behind entering that one, but see what he's at on FanDuel. I know he was at plus 190 earlier, so maybe he did drift to plus 200 because normally they try and beat DraftKings by 10 points. Like that's why he's at plus 185 with Ryan Fox. That's why you're normally going to see slightly better odds over there. They're trying to compete with DraftKings and pull away some of their customers that have access to both sites. So if they're doing that with Etch and you're able to get that slightly better number, then feel free to join me at that plus 200 mark. But make sure to check out the Patreon page for all those matchups too. I do post those for all of my members. Prop tiers, I get access to all the Underdog and Prize Picks props. But for the sportsbook stuff, I do post my free balls for whether you're a DFS or a prop tier member. So that's kind of just like a bonus piece of content that I give all my members, regardless of what tier that you're on. So let's say that you're a DFS player in a state that also has the sports books. You'll be getting that for free on top of your DFS membership. And if you're a prop member, so somebody that plays Underdog and Prize Picks, and you have the sports books, there's not a bunch of sites or a bunch of states where that's the case. Florida is one of them, though, which is kind of nice, right? To have all those different markets to be able to enter. Prop tier will also give you access to those. So reason why I do that is because of how weird the situation is with sports books and then how they're handled between DFS and pick'em sites. So I just opened it up to both tiers so that people weren't missing out. It didn't have to buy, like, for example, let's say that you're a DFS only player and you still wanted the 3-ball matchups. Right? You don't have to buy a whole other prop tier on top of that just for some 3 balls that I enter every once in a while. So make sure to check out the Patreon page for all of that. That's all I've got, guys, for round number 1. It's getting a little bit late over here on the East Coast, but super stoked for all the exposure to come. Tomorrow morning, going to be really keeping an eye on some of those stat averages, as I think there's a chance it plays super duper easy. Like, I know with the field average, I had it at -1 to -1.25, but if it's tracking for closer to a -1.5 average, let's say that there's receptive conditions, the low winds are really letting the players attack, then there could be even more value to attack on some of these boards. So a lot of positive stance plays that I've already entered, but I think that there's a chance, or at least a possibility tomorrow, that there's even more value on these boards than what we think. So if you're part of the Patreon page, you'll be able to see all of my late ads over there. But even if you're not a part of it, you're just doing your own due diligence with your exposure, stay on top of it, right? Sites like Bet the Numbers, sites like Data Golf, where you can track the live stats, are great ways to track some of that. And another thing to consider about this course is, the pin locations. I know we didn't have time to go through them here on the stream. They weren't really available for us quite yet. If they are playing easier than what we're expecting to, then that could be an edge even on top of that as well. So on live ads, staying on top of the stats and the averages as they come in is, in my opinion, the biggest edge that we have with prop betting. We can break down the course, weather, all that ahead of time. That's one of the 2 edges that I really exploit. But the second, and the one that I've found even more success with long-term, is when we know how the golf course is playing, right? You don't have to question it. We don't have to really guess ahead of time. We've gotten really good at making educated guesses on how these golf courses plays, hence, what we've talked about for the last 45 minutes or so. But the only thing better than that is having the cold hard facts and the actual sample size to work with. So if you're not already doing that yourself, you're not already considering live ads after the first hour or 2 of play in the morning, then I would start to consider doing that for your process going forward. You can find a lot of value on it. Now, the thing that's worth noting with that, if maybe you're newer to trying to do so, is that the sportsbooks will start to adjust for it. So that's why I said the first hour of 2 of play. Once you start getting to about the halfway mark, that's at least what I've noticed with these sportsbooks, to about the halfway mark of the AM wave is when you see them adjust. They'll take the averages when they're fully complete, but before they, let's say, get through the whole, they have like both tee times on both sides, right? They're starting on 1 and hole 10. Before they get to hole 9 and before they get to hole 18 on each side, which is only like an hour and a half into play. This is why you have to be kind of quick about it. Right before they get to the last hole on each side is your window to get in props, because as soon as they have the averages for the entire golf course, if people complete play on like 9 and 18, and I hate that I'm saying this because it's really something I probably should have kept to myself. It's at least to my knowledge, something that no one else really knows about. But that's the timing of their bumps, is they wait until the whole golf course is loaded in before adjusting. But before we get to that point, right? I mean, you can make some reasonable assumptions about the last few holes. Like, you can take a look at the scorecard, go like, okay, maybe there's a par 5 towards the end that they can attack. Oh, maybe there's some harder holes towards the end that are really going to, make the scoring average a little bit harder. You can use the partial data and use that to attack the books before they adjust. So that's what I do myself. I probably shouldn't even have given that information out, as the sports books are always in a never-ending war against us and trying to plug up as many of those holes as possible. But that's what you can do if you're up with a coffee in the morning, right? Paying attention to that play as it's heading in, is you can leverage that and try and find some value that way. So my Patreon members are used to seeing those kind of slips all the time being posted. And when I track long-term, I have my spreadsheet where I go through and I'm always looking at what sort of props find me success. My least favorite props are birdie or better matchups. I have the least amount of success with those. Hence why I swear against them like anything else. But my best props on the other side of that, we could look at categories. My best player, Scotty Scheffler. Love betting on Scotty Scheffler. Best categories, greens regulation. But the best timing of props, of like when I enter them, is after lock. My ROI, my long-term hit rate on those is about 61%. My hit rate on props before the round starts is about 59.5%. Still well both into the plus EV range. In fact, I'm really proud of both those numbers. Our hit rate this year for the Bet the Number blog is about 58.3%, actually a little bit lower than what I'm used to. But nonetheless, those are the sort of metrics that you want to have to be a long-term profitable bettor. So on my Patreon page, on top of the averages, on top of every single slip that I'm taking, you guys can learn to become a better of golf in the process. So that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck. Let me catch up on any last second questions, and let's get this thing going. And so questions about my top plays, I am going to default you to the Patreon page. You guys can find those over there. I do have to keep some of the plays behind the paywall. Hopefully those 6 plays that we went through will help you out with a starting point of what to play. You're looking at the Lipsky 3-ball at plus 240. He opened with the 64 at the Deer, then was second after round 1. Yeah, man, the form is really good. Let me check it who he's playing, because, I mean, the 240 seems very juicy, but I'm assuming that he's got an elite tier guy in his group if he's got those sort of odds. So, yeah, it's Denny. That's the tough one in that group, and then Sam Stevens and Lipsky. I would say like plus 240 is hanging quite a big number, but he should be the third favorite in that group. Like, I don't think there's any sort of scenario where you could say that, you know, Denny, Sam Stevens are lower tier players than David Lipsky. But if you were looking for a long shot 3-ball, like something at that plus 240, Lipsky would be one of my top 5 to 10 players that I would be looking at for that. So I'm personally a little bit higher on Denny this week, so that kind of scares me off of wanting to play that myself. If I wasn't as high on Denny, let's say that it was anyone else in the field, and let's say it was just another stud that was plus 150, I would be a little bit more willing. In fact, I might even co-sign that kind of bet. But yeah, as is, I just have a feeling Denny nukes this week, and I hope I'm right because I bet I'm outright, but we'll see how it shakes out. You got Spieth, Ryan Seabu for the under at 67.5. So I'm okay with unders at 67.5, but I do have to say, like, I prefer an over on birdies for players at that point. Maybe even like an over on greens, like I took on Siwoo Kim, just because you're asking for it to be slightly better than average in those. So let's put it this way. Birdie average was like 4 per round, right? To get the 5+ per round to cover 4.5 number, be slightly better than average. That doesn't seem like you're asking too much, because you're not. Same thing with a green regulation number. If it was 13.1, 13.2 last year, it might go up slightly with the really easy conditions tomorrow. A guy to go over 13.5 greens, slightly better than average day, right? You're talking about gaining less than a green to the field to cover that kind of line. To go under 67.5, if I think a scoring average is going to be -1 to -1.5, that's gaining 1 to 1.5 strokes to the field, which is, I know it's not 1-to-1, like one green isn't exactly equivalent to 1 stroke, but as somebody that's been doing golf analysis for a while, and you know, the more that you do it, you'll kind of like catch on to these sort of things. A stroke and a half is a much bigger difference than a half a birdie or a half a green. So that's why I would look at some of those other markets instead, is because you can get those guys to, again, just be marginally better than the rest of the field, as opposed to having a really good round in shooting -3. So I'm not against those, but I think there's better categories. He said, thoughts on Ben An picks this week? I think he's a sneaky good pick for DFS. I don't know if I love him for the prop market, though, just because he's a little bit volatile. Benny An has not been in the best form this year, but he nearly won this event a few years ago. He's played well at the Sony Open, another shorter positional track off the tee. And you wouldn't normally take him at a positional track because he sprays it with his driver, but kind of like Jacob Bridgman. Like, I like Bridgman this week. I like some of the guys that kind of spray it at times, because you don't have to hit driver all day. This is a course where if you want to, you can only hit driver like 5, maybe 6 times at some of the longer par 4s, and you can just get it in the short stuff with an iron or a 3-wood on the other one. So yeah, I think it's a good course fit for him, a sneaky good course fit, but I would rather take him in a format where the volatility is okay. Because, for example, you play him in a DFS lineup when you have 150 other lineups, or 149, I guess, other lineups to play with, then who cares if he misses the cut, right? Like, it's okay, whatever. That could happen this week because his form's not there. But in those formats, when you have all those different lineups to work with, if he happens to top 5, top 10, then that's fantastic, right? That's the kind of upside that we're looking for. I like him in that scenario, not so much on a 50-50 scenario where, you know, he has to be better than average to cash outs. Just a little bit too chaotic of history for me. He's just not playing the best golf now, but I like the upside for sure. He said, thoughts on rolling the dice on Jasper? And you're looking at Kanaya and Hisatuni for the under on strokes. So I'm assuming that means Jesper Svensson, right? And then you're looking at Takumi Kanaya and then Ryo Hisatune. So they were at 68.5 earlier today. So like Kanaya, Hisatune, and whatnot. I probably wouldn't play them now that they bumped down that 0.5. And for example, there are other guys on the board, Jose, at 68.5 that I prefer over those 3 players. So I would personally stay away. I do think it's going to play a little bit easier than last year, but those three players, especially like Kanaya, Hisatune, they've been about tour average lately, so I don't think there's really value at that number. You said your boy Thomas Campbell played in the 3-0 Open and then missed the cut but won the Minnesota PGA. Dude, that's awesome. He's one of your like friends, I'm guessing, then that was doing that. Yeah, I'm close with a couple tour players, most notably Luke Clanton's the one that I know the best, and it's always great to see them having some success. When they struggle, it kind of stinks too. Like my guy Luke has not had the best 2025, but that's awesome, man. And then he, like you said, he went out there the day after, then won the Minnesota PGA Championship. That shows you how good they are on the PGA Tour, right? You can just hardly miss out on the cut and then win an event the very next week. That's golf for you, man. Thoughts on Spieth for the 13.5 greens? So I prefer him for the birdie line just because the iron play has been maybe the one struggle for him this year. Just to show you the stats, let's go to greens regulation. Jordan Spieth, number 136 on tour in the category. Yeah, that would be me playing devil's advocate there. It's maybe not his best category on tour, at least this year. Historically, he's a little bit of a better iron player than that. What's going on, Marwa? Better to have you late than never. You said you took my boy Jordan top 20. I like that. And you said, have I mentioned what players have to do well to qualify? Sorry, you worded that a little bit off, but I think I get what you're saying, right? Who has to play well to get in? I have not talked about it because I don't think it really has that much of a bearing. But if you go to the FedEx Cup standings, it's anyone right around 70. So the players that are like from 60 to 70, they've probably got to make the cut to ensure that they're not going to move out of that top 70. And then anyone from 70 and beyond, I mean, if you're number 150 at this point, you might be a little bit fucked. But if you're in that 70 to 100 range, you end up finishing top 5, top 10 this week, and you work your way in. Now, the reason why we didn't focus on it, and that's really all we're going to say with it, is it doesn't really matter. I know, and you're just joining us, so you didn't get my rant earlier, but these guys try every week, right? They have a lot more to lose than we do. They miss the cut. They're paying to be there. They're spending thousands of dollars to go to all these tour events, between paying their caddy, hotel bill, traveling, right? Jet, maybe plane fees for most of these guys going from event to event. So it's not like they're not trying every other time that they're teeing it up. So guys that are in that like 70 to 90 range, I've heard some people this week on podcasts, they're like, oh, they've got to make it into the top 70, so they're going to try more. No, they're not. You're not showing up to a tour event and half-assing it. That's just not the case. It's not like you go into your job at 7-Eleven, like when I was, growing up in high school, working convenience store in between days at school. If you're doing that sort of thing, you just show up, you get your paycheck, you leave, right? It doesn't really matter. You can kind of just half-ass it. No one on tour gets that except for like the elite tier guys that have their sponsorship deals. They can kind of suck and still get paid a decent amount of money. 99% of the tour players, though, it's their livelihood to play well. So I would stay away from those narratives, especially on like your lower tier guys, because every week for them is break or make. I mean, if they miss the cut, they're losing $5,000, maybe even $10,000, depending on where they're flying. Benny Ann for the over on birdies. So he's at 4. Let me double check on the tee time on Benny Ann. If he's morning wave, I could get behind that. Let's see. So yeah, he's off at 8:07 a.m. I'm okay on that one. He's not one of my favorites at 4, but especially because I know we had the question about him before and he's a little bit volatile. That would be my only thing I'd say on it, is that he's been a little bit crappy recently. He said, thanks for the feedback, of course. The Japanese player, so that's what you're doing with that under. Yeah, I've got to say, Hisatune is a stud, by the way, to go back to your question you were asking before, man. And the Kanaya, he played well last week. So, hey, if you want to enter it for some fun, I could see it. And he said, super fun to see it in person, but yeah, always at top for the Minnesota pros. He said, let's go Mav this week. I don't think Mav's playing, right? Unless I'm missing something. But, dude, that's awesome, Mike. There's a few other players I know as well that I'm not as close with. A few that are on the Corn Ferry Tour especially that I'm a little bit closer to. And one of my buddies, shout out to my guy, Jeremy. I don't know if you're watching this, Jeremy. You probably didn't make it this far into the live stream if you're watching it. So I can say this without pumping him up too much. I've played with Luke. I've played with some of these other guys before in a round or two. One of my buddies, Jeremy, is better than them. And he's not a professional yet. He's working his way towards it. So there's very well going to be another professional golfer that I know that I play golf with. And in this case, with my guy, Jeremy, that I play golf with like every single week. So that would be fun if it ends up coming true. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with everything that you guys are entering this week. Rounds 2 through 4, we'll be doing the same exact thing as we did here. So if you guys found this helpful, you learned a little bit of something about how to attack these prop boards, drop your guy, subscribe here so you guys don't miss any of that content to come. It'll be an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours after play-ins. We'll be going live here on YouTube, breaking down props, also the matchups for the rest of this golf tournament. And that's not only just for this event, but every single tournament of the year. We've got you covered with all this content throughout the weekend. And, that's something that really differentiates this channel from a lot of the other ones out there, is a lot of times you get your content on Monday, Tuesday, you get it for the entire week, and then you don't hear from those guys until the very next Monday or Tuesday. Here, we know that there's golf. There's a whole 72 holes to attack. And in my opinion, the biggest edges when it comes to playing golf are for rounds 2 through 4. There's not as much content on it. People aren't spending as much time on their research process. So if you have a proven process, you have, an idea of how to attack those slates, they're oftentimes the ones that you can generate the biggest ROI on. So that's why we focus on it so much. I also have a whole lot of fun with it. The main slate stuff, betting outrights before the week, can be, fun on its own, right? That's what most people do with golf. But the beauty is, and it's going to sound super degenerate what I'm about to say, and it sort of is, but sometimes you bet a whole bunch of guys to win, and they're like +5 after the first day. When that happens, it's nice to have round 2 showdown. It's nice to have props for rounds 2 through 4. We hope that that's not the case on a lot of weeks like this, but that's the other aspect of it too, right? Not every week is going to end up being perfect for everyone out there. Happens to me a lot, and it's nice to have that exposure over the rest of the weekend too. So make sure to stop on by for the rest of that. Check out the Patreon page for all the content that I'm doing. Of course, that's where all the slips that I'm posting are posted, but also all the fantasy projections that I do. So if you guys saw my stream a little bit earlier on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel, I also have all my DFS stuff posted there too. And this is the censored version of the Patreon page that I do for DFS members. It's got ownership on there for the entire field, my entire 150 max pool. So I enter 150 lineups. I tell you guys exactly who I'm playing, not so you can go out there and tail every single player. I guess you can do that if you wanted to, but more so to give you guys insight into the process of somebody that's entering 150 lineups. You may take a few of the plays that I'm using and implement them yourselves, but it's more so for the teaching side of it, right? And also for all the different research tools that I supply my members. Not only do we have the modeling for every single player, but recent form, also event history at this course, shots gain metrics over the last 24 and last 12 measured rounds, as well as all the modeling, which I can't bring up because it has some of the stuff on the right that I didn't censor in terms of my modeling, but you can see exactly the percentages that I'm using in my custom model from my Patreon page. It's probably the most transparent piece of content that you'll find in the industry, quite literally telling you who I'm playing ahead of time. I don't know a lot of other touts or even websites that would dare to do so, because I have winning and losing weeks just like anyone. And I think a lot of these sites out there, they like to pretend that they're God, like they win every single slate and that they're the very best and, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, everyone has their days, but everyone also has the days where they suck, right? And I'm somebody that's willing to admit that. I'm somebody that's willing to eat that. I know that I'm not perfection. I know that there's always spots to get better. So I'll offer that insight to my people. And I think the other part about it is I know I'm good at what I do. I have proven track record. I've taken down more GPPs than just about every tout that you can possibly think of over the last year or two. So with those kind of results, with my track record, I'm okay putting my neck on the line because I know more often than not that I'm going to be right and that I'm going to find success. So sure, yeah, I'll have the days where I suck. I'll take that on the chin. I'm somebody, I get pissed when that happens too, especially when I get chirped about it. It fires me up. I'm sure you guys have seen that at times, but that's the competitor in me. And I'm willing to put my neck out unlike a lot of other people in the industry. So check it out for the DFS side of things, but that's all I've got. I appreciate you guys showing all the support here on the channel as you guys do. I hope we can cash out on some of the props that we've talked up here together. I hope that we can find ourselves towards the top end of the GPPs if you guys are playing fantasy golf this week. And I've got some outrights in. So you would have seen the Ben Griffin outright earlier. I also ended up betting JT Poston, Denny McCarthy. I bet Jordan Spieth. I'll tell you guys that. We're at the end now, so I'm not going to boost up the ownership too much. So I can talk about my guy Spieth without it having too much of an impact. Also, Akshay Bhatia, I bet for an outright bet this week. So I know we had questions about those two before. I like them enough to bet them outright. So you probably know my opinion there. And the rest of the guys that we talked up from that video on Mondays of the Core Plays live stream, we also got to for outright bets. But that's all. Appreciate you guys stopping by as you guys typically do. I'll see you guys for the content throughout the rest of the week.